Dear students, welcome to the digital classroom of Cambrian College. This is Amitab. I am here with you today and will discuss Unit 6, Adolescence, and Lesson 1. The title of Lesson 1 is The Storm and Stretch of Adolescence. Let's have a glimpse of these images which is given in this slide, and if you have a look at this image, you will have a good understanding about the topic. What are the learning outcomes? At the end of the lesson, you will be able to comprehend adolescence, a transition period of life, the adverse effects of taking drugs, the influence of culture on adolescence, and potential health hazards. Before starting the passage, let's have a proper understanding, or let's get acquainted with these vocabularies. These are very much important vocabularies. Puberty. Puberty means a time or change. That means maturity level of a sexual function. And transition. Transition means a change from one condition to another. From one condition to another. If this change is noticed from one condition to another, then we can term this change with the vocabulary transition. Then vulnerable. What's the meaning of vulnerable? Not adequately protected. The boy is vulnerable means the boy is not adequately protected. So in that case, we use the word vulnerable and the noun form vulnerability. Immunodeficiency. Having not the normal ability to resist infection. That means if you lost the capability of resisting infection, then we can term it immunodeficiencies available within your body. Okay, this is the sentence taken from the text, and what does the sentence denote? Passage: to become adults, regardless of or irrespective of their economic and social status, children must experience several stages like infancy from birth to age 2, early childhood 3 to 8 years, later childhood 9 to 15 years, adolescence 13 to 18 years. This information is available in the text, so no need to memorize, just be with the class and be with the text. According to World Health Organization, that means WHO, adolescence is the period in human growth and development. If you are asked to write down the definition of adolescence according to WHO, you are to write down this. This is taken from the text. I am repeating this again and again. According to the World Health Organization, if you are asked what is adolescence according to who, that means the answer will be, according to World Health Organization, adolescence is the period in human growth and development. That means human growth and development are the prerequisites of the period of adolescence. And this human growth and development that occurs after childhood and before adulthood. What does the definition says according to who? Adolescence, according to the World Health Organization, adolescence is the period of human growth and development that occurs after childhood and before adulthood. Okay, this is the perfect definition of adolescence which is given by WHO, and this definition is available in your text. With the onset of puberty, that means with the start of puberty, the passage from childhood to adolescence is marked. That means this is a whole sentence. In a very fragmented way, this sentence is represented so that you can easily produce this sentence by playing with the vocabularies. With the onset of puberty, the passage, that means the stage of adolescence, is marked from childhood to adolescence. This is the sentence taken from the text. And what is the ultimate purport of this sentence? Characteristics during the time of adolescence. What are the characteristics an adolescent faces during the time of adolescence? Critical transition. An adolescent faces critical transition at this period. Fast-paced growth and development. Fast-paced growth and development is very much prominent in an adolescent whenever an adolescent passes the period of adolescence. Adolescence is important. Why is adolescence important? Adolescence, the period, that means this is the period. The adolescence is important because it contributes much to physical and sexual maturation. Physical and sexual maturation happens. For that reason, this stage is very much important for a young boy and girl. Biological determinants. Determinants means that determines something. That means biological determinants of adolescence is universal. This symbol indicates male entity and this symbol indicates female entity, and these two symbols are universal, and these two symbols are termed as determinants because this symbol determines male and that symbol determines female, and across the world these determinants are universal. Is the information clear to you all? Next, adolescence is a period of preparation. That means it is a period of preparation. At that stage, an adolescent has to take preparation. And preparation of what? For adulthood. That means he is getting prepared, he or she is getting prepared for adulthood, during which one experiences several key developments. That means at that stage, an adolescent experiences several key developments. And what are the key developments? We will see in the next slide. Key developments during the adolescence. 1. Physical and sexual maturation. We have come across the fact earlier. Physical and sexual maturation. This is one of the developments an adolescent undergoes. Movement towards social and economic independence. At that period, an adolescent wants to be socially independent and to have economic independence. This sort of craving is very much noticeable in an adolescent's character. Development of identity. At that period, an adolescent tends to develop his or her own identity. So this sort of tendency is very much noticed at this period. Acquisition of skills. At that period, an adolescent has to acquire some skills because he or she lacks skills. To have a successful transition of this period, he or she has to acquire some skills that will help him or her to have successful transition. So acquisition is skill is very much important, and what are the skills or why do they need skills will be discussed later. Obtainment of abstract reasoning. Obtainment. An adolescent has to obtain abstract reasoning as they lack in abstract reasoning, so they are to obtain abstract reasoning. In a noun form, we can say obtainment of the verb obtain. Obtainment of abstract reasoning or development of capacity for abstract reasoning. They don't have abstract reasoning, so they need to acquire the quality of abstract reasoning. For that reason, it is said that obtainment of abstract reasoning is the prerequisite of passing these critical periods. Then social and economic independence. This is closely associated with that information, movement towards social and economic independence. At that period, an adolescent wants to be financially developed, financially independent. So, social and economic independence, the tendency of developing or having social and economic independence is very much noticeable in their characters. So, these are the important key developments which are represented in this slide, taking from your passage. Then, formation of behavior pattern. What sort of behavior will be formed is determined at this period. So, formation, form, to form the noun form of the verb form is formation. Formation of behavior pattern. Behavior pattern is formed at this period. So, in a noun form, we have written that the formation of behavior pattern. These points are very much important whenever you are supposed to write down flow chart in your exam on the answer scripts. The characteristics vary across time. We have learned about the characteristics of an adolescent, but it is said that characteristics vary across time. On what factor the characteristics vary? Culture. That means characteristics vary from culture to culture. Then time, it varies from time to time. Then socio-economic situation, that means the characteristics of an adolescent mainly depends on culture, time and socio-economic situation. So for 3 factors, the characteristics vary. Change noticed in characteristics. What are the change noticed in their characteristics during this period? We said earlier in the previous slide that the characteristics vary. Now, how can you reinforce this statement with example? These are the example. Puberty seems to come earlier than before. People marry late. People's sexual attitudes and behaviors are different than those of the past. That means our sexual attitudes, the sexual attitudes of an adolescent is very much different than those of the past. So this bears the examples that we said earlier, that the characteristics vary across time, culture and socio-economic situations. And what are the variation of characteristics have been represented here. Then the factors responsible for the change has been noticed, variation has been noticed, and what are the factors responsible for this variation, for this change in an adolescent's characteristics? 1. Culture, education, urbanization, socio-economic situation, and finally globalization. These factors create profound impact on the development of an adolescent's character. So these are the criteria that determines the characteristics within an adolescent. So these factors are very much important, and these factors are responsible for the change in their characters. Here 2 points. Let's have a look. Adolescence is a time of tremendous growth and potential. It is also a time of considerable risks. It's a considerable risk. It is a time of potential growth. We can ensure, an adolescent can ensure potentiality within this period. At the same time, an adolescent can undergo risks, tremendous risks that can ruin his or her life. So considerable risks during which social context exert powerful influence. They run the risks of many unavoidable things. We will come across these later, and in that case society can influence on them. So what are the influence can society exert? And let's first discuss what are the risks. In that case, the tendency of an adolescent will be discussed, and that tendency gives birth to risks. Many adolescents face pressure to use alcohol. Many adolescents face this sort of pressure out of curiosity, probably. Cigarettes and other drugs, out of curiosity, they tend to take recourse to these three things: alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. And the focal point is that at that period, they feel extreme urge to initiate sexual relationship. So they feel pressure to use alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. At the same time, they feel pressure to initiate sexual relationship. And what are the ultimate consequences of their curiosity, of the pressure? The consequences or risks an adolescent faces: sexual exploitation, intentional and unintentional injuries. As it is said earlier that they face pressure to initiate sexual relationships, to use alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes, so they run the risks of sexual exploitation and intentional and unintentional injuries. As they face pressure to initiate sexual relationship, for that reason there is the possibility of being unintendedly pregnant. So these are the risks and consequences. Next, sexually transmitted infection. This is closely associated with the tendency of having sexual relationship with others. So there is the possibility of having sexual transmissions. So this is one of the major vital risks an adolescent may face. Threat of being infected with HIV. There is the possibility of being affected with this fatal disease, HIV. So these are the consequences an adolescents face as they face pressure. Long-lasting negative and positive effects. Whenever an adolescent is associated with negative risks that are discussed, so he may face long-lasting negative and positive effects, basically negative effects, and mental health problem he or she will undergo undoubtedly. So reasons of getting vulnerable. It is said that adolescents are vulnerable. And what are the reasons of being vulnerable? Adolescents cannot apply abstract reasoning. They can hardly apply their judgment whether it is good or bad, whether we should do it or not. That means excessive flow of emotion is noticed at the time of the development of their characteristics. So with the rush of or excessive flow of emotion, they can hardly apply abstract reasoning. So as they can't apply abstract reasoning, this leads them to be vulnerable. They can't understand the relationship between behavior and consequence. They don't understand the cause and effect. As they don't understand the cause and effects, so they may do mistakes, and out of these mistakes they may face the grave consequences. So they can't apply abstract reasoning, and they don't understand the relationship between behavior and consequences. For that reason, they run the risk of being vulnerable. They don't have access to reproductive health information and service. So if they want to have a successful transition without having risks, they need some information. and they need to have access to reproductive health information and service. They need to have access to. But to getting reproductive health information, as we have noticed that to overcome the problems or risks, they need to have access to reproductive health information. But there lies obstacles. What are the obstacles? They can't easily get the reproductive health information. Laws, customs and practices create bars to getting reproductive health information. And providers' attitude to adolescents. If an adolescent, it is said that to have a risk-free transition, an adolescent needs to seek help from the service providers. But an adolescent cannot seek help from the service providers because of the provider's attitude to adolescents, negative attitudes to adolescents. So these are the obstacles to getting reproductive health information. Adolescents depend on their families as they are vulnerable, as they can't apply abstract reasoning, as they don't understand the relationship between cause and effect. They have to depend on families, health service, schools, workplaces, social institutions, and service providers. These sectors provide an adolescents the important skills and information which are very much necessary for having a successful transition. Next, adolescents have to depend on adults. Why? Why do they? In the previous slide, we have come across the fact that they have to depend on families, schools, health service, workplaces, social institutions, and service providers. Why? Because to learn a wide range of skills, as they lack in skills, they need to learn skills. So to learn wide range of skills, they have to depend on the sectors discussed in the previous slide. To cope with the pressures they face, to cope with the pressure, to face the pressure in a very successful way, they need to learn some skills. For that reason, they have to depend on the adults. To make a successful transition from childhood to adulthood, in order to have a successful transition from childhood to adulthood, an adolescent has to depend on several sectors discussed in the previous slide. So they have to depend on other adults, especially to have proper development and adjustment. They have to depend on adults to get proper intervention when problem arises. So as it is said that they don't understand the cause and effect, so there is the possibility of making blunder. So out of blunder, consequences become very much severe. In that situation, they may get frustrated, dejected, or depressed. So an adolescent should play pioneer role to get them out of this distress. That means through proper intervention. Through proper intervention, an adolescent can easily be out of these problems. So after having a good concentration on this video, you must go through the passage, and the passage will be easier for you after enjoying this video. And after going through the passage, try to solve this problem stated in that slide. You can easily answer to these questions given in this slide, and these answers have been discussed in the successive slides, so you can easily answer to these questions without any doubt if you have good concentration on this video lecture. Then for homework, as usual, you are given a flowchart. And what is the question of this flowchart? Based on the reading of the passage, make short notes in each of the boxes in the flowchart showing the different phases that an adolescent experiences. Number 1 is given, passing through 4 or 5 stages, and the information as per the instruction of flowchart you can easily put in the boxes. Then exercise, fill in the gaps. After going through the passage, after having a profound understanding on this unit, you can easily fill the gaps without any doubt, with great confidence. So first, have good concentration, have good focus on the passage, then you can easily come up with perfect solutions. Thanks to you all. Hope you will be with us, and thanks to you all again.